providing people with an open place where they can pursue what they're interested in does plant that seed, and then that seed grows. And also, oh, now that I've learned about what I was really interested in, hey, maybe I'd also like to learn about this, and and those things will eventually become valuable to the organization. We want in the organization people that want to learn. So if we look at what's happening in the world in terms of everything speeding up and everything getting faster, there's no way that an organization today will be exactly the same 2 years from now.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Simplify L&D, Descomplica TD, the most complete learning and development podcast in Brazil. My name is Michel Mussolini, and I would like to thank each and every single one of you that come back every week to listen, to reflect, and evolve as a human being and as a professional. You know, today our episode will be in English because it will be a special episode as we have a special guest. We are celebrating today 4 months of our podcast, and we have invited one of the gentlemen that I consider my idol in the learning and development field. I have been working in the learning and development field for the past 9 years, and during this period I have met several people. I have attended several conferences, workshops, labs, and I had the opportunity to meet a lot of speakers, a lot of professors, and I can tell you with no doubt that there are two guys in this field that I consider the best ones, and I have the pleasure today to have one of them together with me here. He is an instructional technology graduate professor at Bloomsburg University in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, and also work as director of Bloomsburg Institute for Interactive Technologies. In his role, he helps people understand the convergences of learning technology, game, and game thinking through a fun and insightful manner. He is the author of 8 books and believes that the game thinking mindset is a powerful tool for people development and to improve their results. The book, Play to Learn, is translated in Portuguese, and I can assure you it's a great book. You can buy it in all stores. Also, he has released 9 courses at LinkedIn Learning. He is a consultant, professor, entrepreneur, speaker, board member, book author, scholar, learn and development coach, and researcher on the convergence of learning, technology, and business operations, focus on creating engaging and meaningful learning events at all levels. Last but not least, he is the founder of the Learning and Development Mentor Academy, which is a member-only consortium of learning and development professionals that provides those professionals with self-paced courses and live monthly educational sessions, as well as a place to collaborate. It's a great honor to present the one and only Karl Kapp. Great to see you again, my friend. Welcome to our show.
Michelle, it's great to be here. So thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be talking with you this morning.
A little bit nervous, as I told you before. I am with one of my idols, and we are doing this in English. That's not my mother language, so I apologize for any spelling that I may do during this conversation. Okay.
Yeah, no worries. I always tell the joke, somebody that speaks 3 languages is trilingual, 2 languages is bilingual, and 1 language is American. So unfortunately, I've dabbled trying to learn Portuguese, but I've not been successful. So no apologies needed.
Okay, so let's start back in 2017 when I met you during the gamification lab at Macy Center. I do not know if you recall that, but it was
Yes.
on May in Saratoga Springs in New York, and it was the first lab that I have attended about gamification. And back that time we had no data. You mentioned that we had no data, no results, proven results that gamification would either improve people's productivity or efficiency, or that was going to make a shift inside the organizations to improve the willingness of the people to learn. Now, 5 years have passed. How did you see this journey? How gamification right now in US or around the world, if you can share with us, have improved in such a sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's very interesting. In that time, in that 5 years, there's been a number of research studies and case studies looking at the effectiveness of gamification. And they found, I actually did some research, found that there are very positive results of using gamification. Usually, a lot of organizations use it in call centers to help provide transparency of key performance indicators. A lot of organizations are using it from a sales perspective. And then what a lot of organizations have found that I work with that start with gamification and focused on some of the psychological elements of games, really expand that to performance improvement and looking at behaviors of the individuals. And so what organizations are starting to do is look at what behaviors should they incentivize or gamify of a certain group. Maybe it's the call center, maybe it's your sales professionals, maybe it's those other folks, and have found that when they properly gamify the behaviors, it leads to increased results. It leads to motivation. I was working with a woman who works at Microsoft, and she was relating how their focus on gamification really is a tool to build morale. It's a tool to provide clear goals for the reps who are using it, and she's found it to be quite successful.
Do you think that this movement or now this apply the way we are applying gamification now inside the organization is correlated to the increase of the amount of the millennials in the workforce? Do you believe that because of this increase, and as millennials they learn and they act differently than we do, the gamification elements provides an environment to help them improve their soft skills inside the organizations?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that from what I've observed and some of the research that I've read, it's not so much that the millennials or the younger generations think differently or react differently to games, but I think that they're just more comfortable or familiar with a lot of game elements. So, for example, a lot of the apps that they use every day, the TikTok apps, and even going back to Facebook, although a lot of they joke only boomers are left on Facebook. But I think they're just more comfortable with it, and they're okay with mixing business and pleasure a little bit more than some of the older generation. So it's not that the older folks don't like to learn from games. They have just been very programmed that, hey, work is over here and play is over here. But the younger folks are like, yeah, I've seen that mixed all the time, and so they're okay with it. So I think that the openness to that and is something that has made the gamification more acceptable. And when I was in, it was interesting. I had done some work in Mexico a few years ago, and one of the chairman of the company that I was working for said, he was pretty forward thinking on gamification. And I said, why are you so forward thinking? He says, I need to be forward thinking because the individuals that I'm working with aren't always able to read and digest content. They're not always able to look at the training as effectively as I would like them to, but they are all capable of playing games. And so when we mix in the instructional elements in the games, he said that is where we get the biggest uptick in the training. That's where we get the largest engagement in the training. And if we think about the pandemic and what it's done to the world in terms of engaging, in terms of people engaging with one another, there wasn't a whole lot of engagement. And so gamification really came to the rescue in many cases and provided an intimate opportunity for people to share some laughs, to share some common goals, and to get a little bit of enjoyment out of being isolated behind a computer screen for 2.5 years or whatever. So I think gamification has both helped younger generations, is more acceptable to younger generations, but also is somewhat a relief to the older folks who are like, what, it's kind of good to have a breakup of all productivity, all work and no play makes for a dull person. So this allows a little bit of fun and interest into it, and there's no reason why. It's written nowhere that learning has to be boring or dry or it has to be painful. Like, none of that has to be true, and it doesn't have to be true about work either. And so I think gamification is an attempt to add that humanity and that sense of joy a little bit to the work environment.
And when you mentioned that that the millennials, the young folks, it's not that they learn differently, but they are more comfortable with the gaming elements. How does this condition influenciate the decision inside the organizations to use gamification elements for learning, as until now the majority of the leadership are the X generation?
Right.
I heard one of your presentations recently that you do not speak to high managers about gaming when you're making some coaching sessions or making some consultancy, that you try to avoid the game word when explaining
Yes.
to them, because they would think that people will just play instead of provide results. So how is the tip, what's the tip that you can give us when speaking to high managers or high leadership inside the organizations, that it's interesting to use the gaming elements for learning, to make it more fun and also more engaging?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that I'll often say is let's not focus on the method. Let's focus on the results. So let's find out first what upper management wants from the effort. So do they want decreased call time if it's a call center? Do they want increased number of leads if it's a sales position? Do they want more efficient work on paperwork if it's that kind of position? So focus first on what people need from organizational performance perspective. And then sometimes what I'll talk about is behavioral psychology. So gamification is really behavioral psychology given a more fun term. And so behavioral psychology is how do you motivate people to do things? So one way to motivate them is to give them a very clear target of what they need to accomplish. And so a lot of times in gamification efforts, you have a dashboard that gives you insights into what your key performance measurements happen to be, and it just makes it visible on a daily basis. So if you think of a lot of organizations, you have goals and things that you're trying to accomplish, and maybe you get updates on those, every 6 months or 3 months or whatever, but a lot of gamification applications do that every day. And so I say to managers sometimes, wouldn't it be good for an employee to know every day how close they are to hitting their goals? And if they're not as close as you would like, wouldn't it be great to give them some incentive or motivation to help them hit those goals? And then also provide some instruction in case they don't know how to hit the goals. And so when you have that conversation about, wouldn't it be great for employees to know exactly transparency of what they need to accomplish? Wouldn't it be great for them to know how far away they are from their goals? Wouldn't it be great then to incentivize them to work toward those goals? And then all of that actually is gamification. And so I often say that gamification doesn't have to be, some people think, oh, it's like fun, like Mario Brothers or Donkey Kong or some kind of game like that. But actually, gamification can be very subtle things like progress bars, like meters toward performance, like overall ranking, how you performed yesterday versus today. So all of those small senses of progress, sense of recognition, sense of where am I and where I need to be are all elements that happen to be gamification, but also happen to be behavioral psychology that moves the learner or the individual forward. And so people naturally want to do well at their job, but they don't always have the tools to do that. So adding these elements will help them be successful. And then the other thing I always add is a lot of people want to gamify the outcome. So they'll say, well, whoever sells the most wins. And we'll do the gamification like that. But the problem is the people that already know how to sell the most are already going to win, right? They're already going to get the biggest commission. They're already going to do well. And having a contest like that doesn't help people that don't know how to sell. So what we should really do, instead of gamifying selling the most wins, we should say, no. What do people do that helps them sell more? Is it more cold calls? Is it more follow-ups? Is it better product knowledge? And find out what those top performers know or do, what their behaviors are, and then gamify those behaviors. So if, let's say, making more cold calls than anyone else is what the top salesperson does, then let's gamify making cold calls. Don't gamify most sales, gamify making cold calls, because then the people that are like, oh, cold calls must be the way to increase sales, and then they'll do that, and that will naturally increase all the sales. So when I talk to managers, I talk about not gamifying the ultimate outcome, sales, but let's gamify the behaviors that lead to sales, and that will move people that don't know what to do to a point where they will know what to do. So that's another way that I often talk about gamification to upper management.
You're saying that we should gamify the KPIs, not the OKRs, right?
Yes, absolutely right. Yep. Yeah. Much better said than I took a long time to say that, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
Michelle,
but
that's right.
Yeah, trying to translate this to our HR folks, gamify the KPIs, the indicators that we need to accomplish, to achieve the highest goal, right? So
yes, yeah.
and I remember a case that we have down here in Brazil, in an automaker company, that they did 1 year event of gamification challenges, and it was divided in 3 steps. The first step, it was focused on the sales team and the technicians, okay, for the dealers. And the first step, they had several questions that they needed to answer inside the platform, and they have badges for speediness, for high ranking results, etc., about their knowledge of their functions. Then the second step, the best classified ones, they moved them to a second step within this process, and they needed to record a video about best practices, or about a good experience they had in their function, and they posted in the platform. And so the senior leadership reviewed all of these videos and gave points. So, and then the best ones moved to the third step. And the third step was like a role playing game, so a real acting scene where the senior leadership played the role as a customer, and the final finalists, the final people that were in this stage, they needed to act as they were attending a customer, okay? And based on this evaluation, this theater scene that they did, there were judges that gave points, and the finalist, the one that won the prize, had a trip to another country to visit with his family the fabric of in another country. So this was the highest prize of this process, and it was very, very interesting the way that the employees reacted, because before this process, whenever the HR team wanted to the employees learn something, it was based on constantly follow-ups. So everybody entering the platform and do the stuff and learn and answer the questions, and make the tests and so on. And when they did that during that year, it was 2018, everybody, the first thing they did in the morning was to enter in the platform to see if there was a new question, to see if there was a new challenge, and to learn. So they have this competitiveness, this natural competitiveness environment. And so they shift, they didn't need to have follow-up from HR. Actually, the employees were following up HR to see if they were not, sending new stuff. So this was a very interesting case that we have here in Brazil. But I saw that this was a great success. There were some other minor initiatives from the companies, but this episode or this case that we have in Brazil, I saw that the leadership overall were still reluctant to implement gamification in learning, because they think that, if the guy is having fun, they are not working.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so this is still a mind shift that we are trying to here in Brazil make within the high management levels, because they still think that if someone is having fun, they are not being productive, and we were paid to be productive.
Right.
And another thing is that we still have a misunderstanding that gamification is not a game. So I saw a lot of companies that talk to us, and when they wanted something more engaging, they think about gaming, not gamification. So help us here to demystify gaming and gamification. What can you tell us the big differences between these two concepts in order to help HR to understand and to implement the correct stuff within their organizations?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And there is a lot of confusion about games and gamification, and you can look at it several different ways. So basically, what I talk about with gamification is using game elements to help people better either perform their job or learn the content or information that they need to learn. So that can be something as simple as adding points and creating a leaderboard. It can be something more involved in terms of changing the content to be more challenge based. But when we often think about gamification, it is adding these elements, behavioral psychology or game elements to help people do their job better or differently, ultimately leading to better. And those are typically ongoing activities. So it's not like a one and done. It's not a once experienced phenomenon. It kind of goes out over a length of period of time. A game tends to be a very focused, self-contained experience that has a very defined beginning. Let's start and play the game. Middle, okay, we're playing the game, and then end, okay, the game's over. As opposed to, let's say, gamifying key performance indicators, right? Those key performance indicators aren't going away. They're going to stay there. And so now you have a continual feedback through game elements, looking at what those key performance indicators are, looking at how close you are, looking at how much you need to do to get to the end goal, and that's a continual cycle that continues on and on. So I think of gamification as three different types of gamification. One is what I call performance-based gamification, which the points or the badges or the experience is linked directly to what you do on the job. So you're not doing anything differently than you would normally do. You're just getting feedback differently. So that's where, for example, you get feedback on your KPIs. Then there's what I call structural gamification, which is where you add game structure around content, but you don't change the content. So you watch this video and you earn 10 points, or you answer this multiple choice question and you get 5 points. So that's structural gamification. And that's a really good method for propelling people through content, helping them get through. And to your point earlier in that story, it can be so compelling sometimes that people will, log on to the system every day to find out, hey, is there a new question for me to answer so I can earn 5 more points, or what can I do that will help me get this next item? So that can be an exciting way to motivate people. And then the final, I call it content gamification, and that's where you change the content to be more game-like. So instead of starting out with learning objectives, you start out with a challenge or a mystery or a journey. Now, oftentimes these will become mixed. It's okay to use a little bit of content gamification with structural gamification and performance gamification. So, they can be mixed and matched. But from a pure academic, I guess, perspective, performance-based gamification is based on your actual on-the-job performance. Your content gamification is changing content to be more like a game. And then the structural gamification is adding game elements around it. And then a learning game or a serious game is an event where you have a specific beginning, where you onboard people into the game, you play the game, and then you finish the game and then have debriefing. And that's a serious game or a learning game. So those are different ways to look at some of those terms that get talked about often in the field of game and gamification. And ultimately, if you add enough game elements and content gamification to an experience, it may, start to look an awful lot like a game. And in some ways, it's very important to keep those apart to know what is gamification versus a game. But the ultimate goal of both of those activities from a learning perspective is to provide an individual a more engaging way to learn. So I think that's really what's important. Terminology is important when we have conversations, but ultimately what we want to do is create an engaging, reinforcing methodology so that people are learning what we want them to learn. We're reinforcing what we want them to learn and then rewarding them for applying that learning. And all of those, that combination of all of those things can be done both with a game or gamification. It just depends on the level of effort, the systems we have in place, and how our organizational culture accepts games. Some, as we talked about earlier, some organizations are very reluctant to implement games into their toolkit of learning and development tools, and some organizations are a little bit more open to it. I just think it's interesting if you talk about what people aren't having, if they're having fun, they're not working. I read somewhere the opposite of play, the opposite of work is not play. Or the opposite of play is not work. The opposite of play is depression. And so work and play don't have to be at the opposite ends of how we think about it. And if you think about, I ask people to think about their own personal learning experiences, and there's probably a topic or a subject that, that you're passionate about, and it doesn't seem like work at all when you learn about that or when you figure that out. So in the United States right now is going on the World Series, which is kind of funny because it's only 2 American teams. But there are people who follow that and learn about the baseball players and the statistics. And, if you would ask them, hey, are you into statistics? Do you want to take a statistics course? And they would say, absolutely not. Don't like statistics, don't like probabilities, anything. But then you ask them, well, what's the ERA of the batter, and what's their probability of getting on base, and what's their probability of hitting a double? They'll be able to give you all of those statistics. So some of are reluctant to learn things is just how it's framed. I was working with a group one time. It was a union, and they were talking about they were a really hard group to educate, and they, were barely literate and barely understood. This is what management thought, barely understood, how the instructions and all that kind of stuff. But then when you ask them to a person to figure out what their piece pay rate was based on, delay of the machine and this shift, and I mean, they could do it to the penny. So when we're, as people, incentivized and knowledgeable about a subject that we're deeply passionate about, we're able to learn a great deal very quickly and very effectively. So if we could use games or gamification to frame what people are doing at work in a way that's a little bit more enjoyable, understandable, equitable to them, it definitely makes a difference in terms of the work environment itself.
Trying to dissect a little bit what you said, deep in dive a little bit. Nowadays, we are hearing a lot about the lifelong learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Seems like a new wave. Our market always have an acronym or a word.
Yes.
And nowadays we are hearing a lot about lifelong learning. And so lifelong learning, for me, after reading a lot of texts and books and seeing videos, it seems to be an auto-motivation, a person that is auto-motivated to learn, right? And this is very difficult for us to find constantly within the organizations, because first of all, the organizations do not have a lot of content that are engaging, right? They normally they have the compliance stuff, the legal stuff, the procedure stuff. So there is no environment for people to learn things, despite of the functions that they need to perform within the organizations. And second, I believe that there are only a minor percentage of the population that are natural, auto-motivated person to find and to go for a new education. They prefer, to see a Justin Bieber video instead of making a course or a graduation. And when we talk about gamification and the powerful of the gamifying elements to change the behavior of the people, do you believe? I believe, but do you believe that we could say that to the organizations that when they find their own way to create the gaming elements within the organizations to help people learn, they will naturally plant a seed within their hearts that will lead them to seek for knowledge and seek for education and grow as human beings and as professionals, and then really collaborate to implement the lifelong learning within the organizations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I definitely believe that. I think, if you look at a lot of educational offerings from school, elementary school all the way up, kids in elementary school are very curious about learning and very much sponges. They learn everything that they can. And then when they get older, we put them in such an educational structure to say, well, you can't learn what you want to, what you're curious about. You have to learn this, or you have to learn this, or you have to learn that. And even when you go to university and you're curious about, let's say, biology, No. You can only take certain biology courses. You can't learn anything about biology. You have to take what's in the courses. And when you get into a company, you might be, hey, I'm interested in leadership, or I'm interested in, personal growth or whatever. No. You have to take the courses that we have here that we think are valuable for you. So I think one of the things that an opportunity missed in terms of personal growth and planting the seed for learning is we constrict the universe of what we say to people that we think is good for you to learn in this environment. But actually, learning in general and accelerating learning is a skill. It's just like if we worked out or went to the dojo, right? It's a skill that you have to practice, and if you don't practice the learning, then it atrophies and you lose that skill set. And so providing people with an open place where they can pursue what they're interested in does plant that seed, and then that seed grows. And also, oh, now that I've learned about what I was really interested in, hey, maybe I'd also like to learn about this, and and those things will eventually become valuable to the organization. We want in the organization people that want to learn. So if we look at what's happening in the world in terms of everything speeding up and everything getting faster, there's no way that an organization today will be exactly the same 2 years from now. And the only way it will remain competitive 2 years from now is through the adaptation of the organization, and adaptation only happens through learning. So if we can help our employees, our associates, our coworkers become better learners, first what they're really passionate about, and then what we suggest they should learn as well for the organization to remain adaptive, then we have a real competitive advantage. I think there's a saying that says the only remaining competitive advantage in an interconnected world is being able to learn faster than your competitors. So if we can set up our organization to learn quickly and to encourage people to learn and give them time to learn, then we're going to have a really competitive, adaptable organization. If we regulate people to, hey, you can only learn ABC because the world's not going to change and you have to know this, I think that puts us as an organization in kind of a precarious position. So it's very important, and I agree 100% that people need to learn, need to have that seed planted, and that seed will definitely take root and benefit that individual, the organization, and eventually society.
An episode of our podcast where I talked about 5 limits that we need to give ourselves to not enter in the quiet quitting. And one of the signs is within an organization, if you don't have time to learn, this is one of the signs that probably will help you to enter in the quiet quitting mode.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was interesting you mentioned that, because time to learn is very, very needed to the organizations to keep competitive, because they need to provide their employees time to learn, to make it the things they do differently, and it comes only, this will only be accomplished with knowledge, right? So they
Yes.
need time to learn. Now we play characters in our life. We play a character of being a son, then a father, then a husband or wife, being a brother or a sister, and being an employee or being a leader. So in every step our life, we during a day we play different roles, right? And one of the things that is interesting in gamification is that we can make within the games choices that we can see the consequences of our choices, right? I saw a video presentation that you gave 2 weeks ago, and you mentioned about the secrets of Monkey Island. This was a funny game. I loved that game when I was younger. And then you mentioned about also another very good game, the Red Dead Redemption, and where your character keeps evolving or devolving depending on your choices, depending on your behavior, and sometimes we struggle to make choices in our life, professional or personal life. We struggle because we are not able to map the consequences of our choices. And the gamification and the gaming elements and the gaming, the concept of helping us providing the consequences of our choices, I believe that is very powerful, because you can fail without impacting the organizational results, right? So do you believe that we will have, in a short period of time, environments within the organizations where we will be able to simulate certain actions, certain decisions, and see the results, see the consequences? For example, I need to give candid feedback to an employee that has done something terrible, and then me as a manager could select questions or answers, or how I conduct the conversation, and see the consequences of that in a way to improve, to develop myself as a leader. This was just an example, but do you believe that in short term of time, based on what you're saying, the companies will invest on this type of solution to develop their personnel?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's very interesting. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, there's a whole genre of gaming called strategy games or war games. So it was based on an individual company basically going through a very detailed scenario about market conditions and what the competitors are doing and launching new products. And they would take days, sometimes a week, to play out these games. So you'd have two sides. One would be the company side, and the other side would be the competitor side, and they would play out, and they'd have a referee in the middle who would make a judgment on the decision of whether or not you expanded into a marketplace or not. And those were very popular. And then they kind of, for whatever reason, lost popularity in the 80s and 90s and the first part of the 2000s. And now they're coming back. So they're called, either strategy games or war games or pressure conflict. But the idea is that it would simulate the market environment at a very high level. So what would you do if you implemented a new product? And what would be the result of that new product? And how would your competitors react? And what would you do? So that's starting to come back in terms of those kinds of games. But then also we've seen kind of a more of a micro level where using branching scenarios or branching simulations, employees are in a kind of a game-like environment where they have to make decisions, and they can view the consequences and get feedback on, to follow with your example on dealing with a candid feedback to an employee that's done something that is not appropriate. And so these types of tools, now that it's a little bit less expensive than it used to be to create, they can be done digitally. So somebody can, it doesn't take a lot of resources to do it. And it provides really good insights and feedback into what the employee should be doing in an environment kind of like choose your own adventure, or find out your own answers, or like Red Dead. They're not quite as open world as Red Dead Redemption, but basically an open environment where the decisions you make have consequences, and then you can view the consequences, but all in the safe haven of the branching scenario or the game type environment. So I think that is actually becoming more and more prevalent, and I think will become more and more popular as companies need to train their employees very quickly, and we don't have the luxury of, oh well, they have 10 years of experience. Well, we've got to train them up quickly, and these types of games and scenarios allow that to happen.
It's interesting when you have the real experience. You learn much faster, right? Than through a book or through a course, because you live that, right? You experience, we say here in Brazil, in your skin, right?
Yes.
And then you really learn. And in this context, what are your thoughts about the metaverse? Because I saw a presentation on ATD about an onboarding process through metaverse, and based on my personal experience, was that if you do not have full immersion, I mean with the length, the headset, to twist your brain a little bit in order to, you do not know what is reality or not. If you're just making playing like Second Life, like we had several years ago, I believe that this will not make a difference, or will not achieve the results as we want it. But when you do with a real immersion, that you think that you are really in that virtual world, then the experience will be in your skin. We will have that experience. So what is your thoughts? What are your thoughts about the metaverse or learning? Do you believe that we do need real immersion, or this is something that the X generation, like we are, needed, but the young ones do not need? How the academic world are seeing this tendency to learn through avatars, like the movie Ready Player One,
Right. Yes.
Do you believe that this will have an real impact short time? How are you seeing
Yeah,
this?
that's a good question. So I think that the metaverse is, I've been studying the metaverse. We've been since like 1997 when I was in graduate school, and this total immersive situation. And it's the problem, I think, right now is they're trying to, it works in certain, like you said, completely immersive environments where you have to be immersed to understand it. So for example, You could watch a video on, driving a tank under battle conditions, and you could read accounts of a tank under battle conditions. But until you're in the tank and it's shaking and it's hot and there's gunpowder smell, sulfur, and you're in some kind of danger, you don't really know how you would react or how you would operate. So putting somebody in a metaverse environment like that makes a lot of sense, because we want to get all your senses involved. We want you to have that experience. Onboarding somebody into a company, you don't necessarily need to be that immersed, right? And what has happened a lot of times is the rush into the metaverse. People create experiences in the metaverse that are actually better, smart. So for example, one of my experiences in the metaverse is I walked into a virtual classroom, sat on a virtual chair, and watched virtual PowerPoint. And I thought, what a waste of the metaverse, right? That doesn't make sense. So I think we're still trying to figure out where it works most effectively. And so we are doing some work. Another example is I think the goggles are a bigger impediment than what people think. So we were working for a very large hardware company, and they said, we want to do diversity and inclusion training in the this virtual metaverse experience for everybody in our company. We're like, okay, well, how many people do you have? Well, we have like 100,000 employees. Okay. And we want to, have them all get a pair of goggles. Well, at $500 a piece, even as a hardware company, that's over $5 million, and you haven't taught them anything. You just got them the hardware. So we decided, video works better for that kind of thing. So I think it's got some really good niche uses. I think it has some really compelling use cases, but I want everyone to step back and not say, oh, the metaverse, let's put all of our training in the metaverse because it will be better. That's a mistake. I mean, honestly, in 2022, there are still some learning tips that work really well on a 5x8 note card, and you have it by your desk, and it you don't need the metaverse. So I think we have to be really careful about overkill with the metaverse, and environments where, if you're responding to a burning building and you have to learn how to look above and look behind you so that you don't get trapped by fire. I think that metaverse is a great example of that. If you're working underwater on an oil rig, that makes sense. I think, learning how to file credit reports with your computer is just overkill.
I wouldn't go to a doctor that learned to make surgeries through metaverse, right? I definitely wouldn't go to that doctor. I am finishing my theology graduation this year after 4 years, and I was thinking, for example, for theology graduation, for certain disciplines, would be great to have metaverse, because, for example, imagine when you are studying the history of the church, for example, and some decisions that the church did in the 15th century, and you could, if you could, put a lens, and put a headset and live for a second that environment, that would be an excellent opportunity.
Yes,
for sure the learning would be outstanding, for the students, or a passage from Jesus that you need to study. Imagine that you see Jesus there, speaking to the crowd.
Yeah.
Now that would provide you a totally different scenario for learning, a totally different experience, right? Well, so in order, I would be, talking to you here for a lot of hours, but we are needing to wrap up our conversation. And normally, I finish my interviews with 3 final questions. Okay, so
Okay.
the first one is what was the most positive moment, in your career, the moment that you, when you think about, have that joy inside of your heart, that you can share with us.
Oh, that's a great question. I think from my academic career, so it's just something that happened the other day was I went to a conference, and one of my students was presenting on a topic. And it's just so satisfying to see the students come full circle. So you can remember when they were a brand new student and, new to the field and not sure about what was going on. And then years later to watch them be respected in the field and to provide a very compelling presentation. That's very, very satisfying.
And your learning moment, to not say the worst situation of your career, but the situation that you learned a lot, that you can share with us.
Oh my goodness, there's so many of those. Wow, I'm trying to think. So we were trying to help an organization implement a piece of software, and we had spoken to the people who were going to use the software and the people that developed the software, and they all had an opinion about it, but it still wasn't working, and we couldn't figure out why it wasn't working, and we spent a lot of time and effort, and it turned out that we had not asked for input from the supervisor, who had a whole different thought on using the software and how to make it work. So I really learned a lot about making sure that you talk to all the stakeholders and not miss any stakeholders. So that was a big mistake.
Yes. And finally, how do you define your current purpose in life, as a professional and also as a human being?
Oh wow, that's a deep question. So what I try to do is I try to teach people in as enjoyable and informative and kind way as possible. And I view my role here on earth as one of teaching and helping other people achieve their high performance or high level of knowledge through me being a conduit to that knowledge. So I try to let people know that learning can be fun, that learning doesn't have to be drudgery, and that everyone can learn and become better.
Very much, Carl, for sharing this with us. I would like to thank you once again for being here with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's always a great learning opportunity for me, and I'm very happy to be able to share this with the people here in Brazil and also around the world, because this podcast will be in English, so can be understandable for many people around the world. And also, I would like to thank you for being such a great person, very humble, very simple, and very, human, because you are always, you transmit to us calm, joy, and good vibration. So it's always very, very nice to talk to you, to be with you. Okay.
Yes, it's always great to be with you, and I can't wait to get back to Brazil.
When you do, tell me. Okay, we will go to that Chinese restaurant.
Yes.
Again. Okay.
That's a great restaurant.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone, to listen to our special episode of Simplify L&D, the podcast that collaborates to your involvement as a professional and as well as a human being. Wishing to see all in our next episode. Keep safe. God bless you all. Digital regards to everyone. Bye-bye.